The Beatles and Wings are disparate siblings in the musical legacy of Paul McCartney, the 20th century's preeminent musical figure. The Beatles, lauded as the toppermost of the poppermost, and Wings, despite significant commercial acclaim and similar longevity, scarcely talked about.
The punk movement was in full swing when I decided it'd be a good thing to write a Scottish waltz.
Paul McCartney is well aware of this discrepancy, and insofar as he plays Wings songs at all in concert, he invariably recycles Wings songs off-band on the run, scarcely venturing outside its bounds. But it's worth exploring Wings in their entirety, and it's worth noting too what an underappreciated project Wings was. Of course, to get a measure of the band, you could just look Wings up on Wikipedia, but Wikipedia begins inauspiciously by claiming the first Wings album was Wildlife, released in December 1971, when it is in fact Ram. This is not something I just made up because I think Ram should be a Wings album. Ram really is a Wings album, and to prove it, I'm going to give you approximately 10 reasons just exactly why.
Weak and tired, oh, mestro and frere see my desire. You think that people have enough of silly loves? Oh! Just band on the run, band on. A bit flat, mate.
Oh, they only checked him this morning.
Wings' greatest.
I wouldn't be so bold as to claim Ram was a Wings album if Paul hadn't already done so himself. And he first did this way back in 1978, when he released Wings' greatest hits, which is still available for purchase and has the Ram track Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey on it. And on the back of the compilation, it even shows you the albums the hits are taken from, and it shows you Ram. Yes, it actually shows you the cover of an album that's not supposed to be a Wings album. Uncle Albert is not sneaked in, as some bonus track Paul thought was too good to leave off. It's integral. And so is Another Day, recorded during the Ram sessions, and now included as a bonus track with the Ram album. That's 2 Ram-era songs included on a Wings greatest hits album. Bit weird, don't you think, if Paul doesn't think Ram is by Wings? But I guess it's always possible the record executives asked Paul to put 2 of his supposedly non-Wings hits on a Wings album to boost sales. So let's hear that Ram is by Wings from the man himself. Paul very rarely performs tracks from Ram because he was gaslit by the music press a long time ago into believing Ram was a bad album, but over the years, fans here and there have told him just how awesome Ram is. And so here is one of those very rare exceptions where Paul performs a Ram song, and just listen to what he says about it.
This is for the Wings fans. This is for the Wings fans.
Now at this point you might be wondering who actually played on Ram. Well, the 3 core musicians who were there from start to finish all became members of Wings. Those were Paul McCartney, Linda McCartney, and Denny Sewell. Hugh McCracken played in part of Ram and was invited to become a Wings member too, only apparently declining due to family commitments. Nevertheless, you can see that in Paul's mind, the Wings project started with Ram. Speaking of the Wings line-up, when Paul realizes he is in a band called Wings, he invites Denny Laine along to flesh out the line-up, and these 4 musicians then go on to make what is officially called the Wings debut album by the gatekeepers at Wikipedia. Then that same year, Henry McCullough joins, and we can see that incarnation of Wings on the Wings European tour. When Wings went on the road, what did they do? Besides playing their latest material, they played Ram songs, including Eat at Home and Smile Away. On Ram, Paul gives us a sneak preview of a song called Big Barn Bed, only for this song to reappear in full on Wings' album Red Rose Speedway as the first track that opens the album. The song is effectively previewed as if to say, I'll be back soon, not least because on the Ram album Paul acclimatizes the listener to it by fading a brief version of the song Ram on in and out on the first side, only to reprise a longer one on the second. On the official debut album, some say the standout song is Dear Friend, but it's not really a wildlife song. It was recorded during the Ram sessions. You actually have a Ram song on a Wings album, so it must be clear by now that Ram is a Wings album in everything but name. Now consider this. Who is on the front cover of the so-called Wings album, Red Rose Speedway? After their official debut Wings Wildlife, you would expect it to be Wings, but in fact, it's only Paul. The others are barely visible, even on the inserts. And on that album, he briefly called the group Paul McCartney and Wings. You see, Wings were never really an indivisible and consistent band, in the same sense the Beatles with a record contract were. As Denny Lane later explained, they were very much Paul's venture, and as John Lennon also recognised, Wings were like Plastic Ono Band, just whoever the ex-Beatle was playing with. That didn't mean that Wings did not have artistic input and the occasional songwriting credit. It simply meant that they were a fluid roster of rapidly changing lineups, 7, depending on how you do the maths, that was something more than a solo artist's backing band and something less than a cohesive band with a proper identity. I mean, it's staring us right in the face, isn't it? This album is part of the Paul McCartney Archive Collection, not the Wings Archive Collection.
Spend it all, don't stop, take it back to the top.
When Wings finally fell apart, Paul didn't even tell his stalwart bandmates what was going on, and Steve Holley slowly came to realise that the Wings dream was over when Paul ceased to return his calls to the MPL office. I've no doubt that much of the way Paul treated Wings lies in his desire not to be compromised in the same way he was as a Beatle, but it did mean that Wings were never allowed to grow into a proper band. It also meant Wings were not treated with the respect the band really deserved.
What sort of group is Wings? Is it a very close group or?
Very close veins.
Yes. Very close veins, yes.
But I digress. I was saying that to Paul, Wings were just a sort of subdivision of Paul, or a band in a box that could not function apart. And there's plenty of evidence for this. Paul was so hazy in his mind about Wings being a proper band that he made the B side of his 1985 single, Spies Like Us, a Wings song. He also put the Wings song Goodnight Tonight as a bonus track to McCartney 2. But wait, there's more. On Spotify, Paul McCartney and Wings are listed as 2 separate artists with their own respective albums, except both artists have the album Band on the Run listed in their discography. There's no logic to this, and it clearly skews the monthly listening statistics. This would be like putting Sgt. Pepper amongst Paul McCartney's discography just because it's popular and helps boost his profile. But wait, there's more. I gave you Red Rose Speedway as an example of a Wings album in which the Wings group concept is subordinated to Paul's quasi-solo status. Later on, a bizarre inversion of this occurs and essentially equates to the same thing. Wonderful Christmas Time is a Christmas song performed exclusively by Paul McCartney and released under his name, but in the video, the members of Wings appear. That's right, Wings members appear in the video of a Paul McCartney solo song that they did not play on. But wait, there's more. The song coming up from the same recording sessions was released both in a Wings version and a solo version. There's no mystery here. By releasing a compilation album called Wingspan, with music from 1969 to 1984, and a cover showing hands that taper at the edges, he's made it quite clear that the roots of the Wings project began as far back as the tail end of 1969, when Paul started recording his first solo album, McCartney, with Linda, and continued one way or another up to 1984 with the release of Give My Regards to Broad Street, which still included Wings material on it. Even the two albums prior to that, Pipes of Peace and Tug of War, are much more entangled with Wings than most people realize. What with Denny Laine playing on them and the other Wings members rehearsing some of the songs before Paul decided to go solo with them. The tapering is an acknowledgement that though Wings was officially launched in 1971, Wings was conceptual. To Paul, it represented the idea of rebirth after the trauma of losing his cherished status as a Beatle and succeeding in a new band. But Paul would come to realize that he was in a kind of limbo. He was half solo artist, half band member, and the Wings project had never really bedded down properly. Again, the music press played its part, skewing Paul's assessment of London Town and Back to the Egg, which have some stunning work on them, but were both derided at the time. So he finally began to break away, until with the release of Press to Play, Paul was a complete solo artist. No Wings members, or Wings songs or songs written during the Wings era lurking in the background. Of course, Ram will never formally be recognized as a Wings album, and there are arguments why it shouldn't be. Likewise, there will always be a case for saying that Let It Be was the Beatles' final album and not Abbey Road. Though, for the record, I am very much Team Abbey Road, but you get the point. In music history, things are seldom neat and tidy, and there is no easy line that can be drawn between Wings and solo Paul. But we don't have to draw it. Paul has quietly drawn it himself by putting Ram on the Wings' Greatest Hits album. The Wings' Greatest Hits album is still on sale and is canonical.
Of course, you might argue that Paul was simply too big for anything more than a backing band, and this video essay proves that.
Whilst labouring a point about a vaguely tangible band called Wings that never quite took flight. But just as I put Results by Liza Minnelli with my other Pet Shop Boys albums, I'm going to put Ram with my Wings albums and not lose sleep over it. Should a band be called a band if the band is basically a Paul McCartney project? Well, that's another argument. Mine is simply that Ram is a Wings album.